One of the things I love most about being ordained is the opportunity to study and train in monastic precepts. So today I wanted to share two sections from the Vinaya that I have thought about often and which continue to inspire my mind. So one is a little passage that comes from the origin story of the Vinaya itself, which is quite a curious section, I think. It's translated into English from the Theravada Vinaya by Abbey Horner. So that's the version I'm thinking about. And it begins with a Brahmin from a place called Varanja who goes to see the Buddha and to criticize him, to ask him why he doesn't pay respect to Brahmins. So the origin story of the Vinaya actually begins with this debate between the Buddha and this Brahmin. And it's just remarkable how the Buddha responds, because the Brahmin's there basically to criticize him, and he says things like, "The revered Gautama lacks taste." Then the Buddha replies, "There is indeed, Brahmin, a way in which one could truly say of me, the recluse Gautama lacks taste. For taste for forms, sounds, scents, flavors, and tangible objects, these have been destroyed by the Tathagata, cut off at the root, made like a palm stump, so utterly done away with that they are incapable of future arising. This is a way in which one could truly say of me, the recluse Gautama lacks taste. But that is not what you meant." So he goes on like this for quite a while, where the Brahmin just lobbies one criticism after another, and the Buddha says, "What you said is true. It's true in this way, and that's not what you meant." So I just thought it was such a beautiful demonstration of the Buddha's skillful means and of course his incredible fortitude, right, of not getting triggered at all. But at the end of this exchange, this Brahmin takes refuge in the Buddha. He's completely convinced that the Buddha's teachings are the truth, and he offers to host the Buddha and the monastics for the rains retreat at Varanja. But most unfortunately, by the time the monastics arrive in Varanja, there's a famine. And so at that time, Varanja was short of food and stricken by hunger, with crops blighted and turned to straw. And so when the monks went out for alms, they received nothing. And it was only from horse dealers from the north, apparently. So it's people who had some supplies, right, who had come down to Varanja. They were the only ones who were able to offer the monastics anything. So it says that they offered them steamed grain. I'm not quite sure what exactly it is, but it can't have been very tasty because it was meant for the horses. So that's what they offered to the monastics. They counted out what would sustain their horses and what they could offer, and that's what all the monastics received. And so the monastics went back, and many of them pounded the grain, and then cooked it and steamed it and ate it. And so the Buddha heard the sound of a mortar pounding, and he went out and asked his attendant, the Venerable Ananda, what was going on. And so the Venerable Ananda reported what was happening. Then the Buddha says to Ananda, good, Ananda. You who are superior people have conquered the problems of famine. Later generations will despise even rice and meat." So when I first read this passage in the library, I just sat there and cried. Because I think it really hit home for me that the fact that the monastic community exists today is entirely due to these amazing practitioners who practice through all kinds of hardships. I mean, if there were a famine, I would probably call home and ask mom for food. I'll be honest about where my practice is. But for all of them, there weren't even precepts to keep at this time. Yeah, but it was so clear to them, continue with your practice, accept what you receive, keep going. Yeah, not a single one of them thought, it's time to run away or complained or, they just did their best. So that was one piece that really struck me. And also because of these practitioners who've practiced well, the lay people respect them for their spiritual dedication, and they therefore want to support the monastics. So again, the fact that I have resources today, that I have food to eat, is again due to the kindness of all these monastics who came before, all the way back to the time of the Buddha, without which I would not be enjoying this support from the lay people today. So I guess I was just very moved by this thought. And of course, very sadly, I will say I am part of those later generations that will despise even rice and meat. That statement just made me think about how the kind of attitude I have when I eat, right? That every day we say I will accept this food without complaint, without attachment or complaint. But for sure, I am one of these people who sit there and pick faults at whatever we receive, Tofu could be saltier, sweeter, whatever. Yeah, we have rice and tofu. So, just that mind that is unappreciative of all this kindness. So feeling sad about that. But at the same time, I really appreciated the Buddha's compassion, because even though he saw that later generations would behave in this way, he still established the Sangha. He still laid down precepts and ways for us to purify them, and ways for people who want to live in an ordained life to do so. So just this little passage, I don't know, really made me feel the compassion of the Buddha and all these practitioners who have come before. And I often go back to the origin story of the Vinaya when my mind is not in a good place. It just reminds me of, wow, the Buddha's compassion in establishing a community of practitioners that we can be part of today. The other passage that I think about quite a bit too comes from the Pratimoksha Sutra that we recite every half month. So this is the sutra that contains all the precepts. And it's at the very end, and it's the Buddha's final advice. So that section says, when the world-honored one was about to enter parinirvana, great compassion arose in him, and he gathered the assembly of monastics together and gave these instructions. Do not say after my parinirvana that pure practitioners have no protector. Now that I have taught the Pratimoksha Sutra and the excellent Vinaya well, regard these as the world-honored one after my parinirvana. If this sutra remains long in the world, the Buddha Dharma will be widespread. And because it is widespread, nirvana can be attained. So this idea of the precepts as your teacher is something I've spent time thinking about too. At the full ordination, it's like kind of pasted on the wall in Chinese calligraphy, take the precepts as your teacher. Or we were in a monastery in Singapore where it was carved on this giant pillar. It's like, yeah, what does that mean? So I think in my own practice, it only started to hit home actually on a trip that I took with Venerable Children, where circumstances arose in which I broke a minor precept, and she was present. And she, like a good teacher, pointed it out to me and said, well, you've broken this precept. And I said, it's a minor precept. Some kind of lousy attitude like that as a new monastic. And she cautioned me and said, minor precepts are like a fence. And she said, the bottom of your shemdap, right? There's that whole strip at the bottom. That's the fence that's protecting you from breaking the major precepts. Yeah. Then she cautioned me to, you should pay attention to even when you break minor precepts. And she recommended reading the origin stories of the precepts to see what afflictions each precept is helping us to work with. So that was why I wound up in the library reading those origin stories and crying. But it really helped me see too that the precepts show me the state of my mind. I think that's when it sank in that, someone with such thick ignorance like myself, I can't see my mind. But by the time it becomes a transgression of body or speech, it's like offense, bang, right? Oh, right there. There it is. Something's up in my mind. It's clearly an affliction that's driving me to break the precept. What's going on? And then I can sit down and start looking inward and figuring out what I have to work with. So I think that's how I understand, at least at this point, what it means for the precepts to be my teacher. Even if the Buddha is not here anymore, even if one day my teacher is going to pass away, even if I am alone, away from the monastic community, the precepts will show me what I need to do. Right? And if I break them, I'll know where my mind is. And we've learned how to purify the precepts as well. So it becomes a form that guides my whole life. And very often, when I come back, when my mind is unruly, I come back to asking myself, what is the best situation for learning and keeping the precepts? And that's how I try to make decisions, which is what Venerable has taught us as well. Like for that to be the primary principle by which we make decisions. Is this going to be a good situation for keeping ethical conduct or not? If not, don't do it. Or if no choice, then be very, very careful. Yeah. And in reflecting on this, I thought it was so strange, maybe, that here in the West, it seems there's a lot of difficulty around, maybe difficulty is not the right word, maybe like the monastic community, keeping ethical discipline is seen as something kind of old-fashioned or patriarchal or, being a monastic is not necessarily something worthy of respect in a place where Buddhism is new. Because to me, ethical conduct is the very foundation of the 3 higher trainings. Right? Without ethical conduct, how would you ever have a calm, concentrated mind? And how would you develop wisdom? At least that's how I came to Buddhism. I was not necessarily someone who was interested in taking rules and keeping them. And that's not at all our relationship with the precepts. But it was because I saw that even just keeping the 5 lay precepts helped my whole life to really calm down. And it really helped my meditation practice, that I thought, wow, it's true. This is how I want to progress. Without keeping ethical conduct, I can't keep my mind straight. So that's why I really value the precepts. So too, at the full ordination, we used to recite, precepts are the foundation of unsurpassed awakening. One should wholeheartedly uphold the pure precepts. So just to remember that, we're not these are not burdensome rules that you take on, but it is the foundation of the path to liberation and full awakening. So in reflecting on these 2 passages, it just reminds me that for me, living in the precepts is being protected by the Buddha. Like till today, his compassion continues to protect his practitioners. That through the precepts, I'm protected by the kindness of the Sangha community and the kindness of our teachers, without whom we would not have these precepts at all. We would have no clue what to do and how to keep them. So I do hope that by being ordained, we create the causes not just for ourselves to keep precepts, but to create communities where others who are like-minded can come forward and take and live in precepts as well. And that, I believe, is the best way to repay the kindness of the Buddha, of the Sangha, of our teachers, and of all sentient beings.